Well, we'll go straight to Uche because he has some other commitments. So, Uche, would you share your experience in investing in this sector in Africa and your views on growing Africa's SME sector into large Pan-African regional companies? And how, in your opinion, can we partner with you and the private sector to scale up that activity?
Thank you very much. I think before I delve into this, maybe it's important I tell everyone what we do at the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. I'm the CEO of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. It's a new organization founded about 2 years ago with a mandate to invest across 3 funds. One is a stabilization fund, the second is a future generations fund, and the third is an infrastructure fund focused on Nigeria. We decided within the infrastructure fund to focus on 6 areas, agriculture being one of those, motorways, power, gas processing and transport, healthcare, some of the key areas, and real estate as the 6 areas we wanted to invest in. Now, to your question, I think the first observation that we've had when we started was obviously the challenge of equity and having ample equity to grow these businesses, and that is something that I see as a challenge for most of the small and medium-scale enterprises that we have come across. The second thing is obviously what Jean-Philippe mentioned earlier, which is the cost and duration of debt, which remains an ongoing problem. I'm sure we all know this. Our experience, and we've made an investment, I think recently we've announced a commitment of $100 million in debt to a local gas processing and transportation company, which we hope will make that transition into something fairly large over time within Nigeria, while helping solve basic infrastructure issues like power. And we continue to look for such places where we can make investments where there's additionality, not just for the company, but in terms of what it solves for the country. My experience is obviously now in terms of how do you start to deal with the issue of the capital structure of these companies, both equity and debt. I think that before we delve into that, it's also good to acknowledge where we have come from. It's a good problem to have now that we can actually start to have a local private equity industry develop in places like Nigeria, which didn't exist 20 years ago. But I think that more can be done and more needs to be done. It is nice to see most African countries start to develop sovereign wealth funds, and those sovereign wealth funds, in my opinion, should take the lead in making investments in developing the local private equity market, because that's one way of trying to, over time, lowering the cost of capital for most of these companies. To that extent, at the NSIA, we've made 3 investments in private equity companies. We've invested in 2 that have significant exposure across Africa, and we've invested in the 3rd one that is focused on agriculture within Nigeria, and we continue to look for more opportunities of such. I think, number one, that is the first key building block in trying to help small and medium-scale enterprises access the kind of capital they need that helps, in my opinion, to start to build the businesses. Because the good thing about having that industry developed is that it also helps businesses have the right governance, have the right structures, the right operations to prepare themselves for growth. Listen, when you go through Nigeria and look at most of the companies, a lot of them are very successful doing simple little things. But it takes a lot of structure to build your business for growth. You can't handle growth if you don't have the right building blocks in place. So I think it's very important that you have this source of capital, because it brings other benefits, which is in restructuring the businesses and making them ready and prepare them for growth. So we've seen a few of these type of businesses. I expect that these things start to grow. And as African countries mature into being able to aggregate their capital and use it more effectively, this is an industry that needs support. The second thing is deepening the source of capital for most of these companies. It is no coincidence that the most developed capital market in Africa is in South Africa, and that coincides also with the fact that you have most of the top 100 businesses that are large. It could be coincidental, it could be causative, who knows, but the point is that the two are closely interlinked. So when you look at a place like Nigeria, for example, a lot of the companies that reflect the economy are not in the capital market. How do you deepen the capital market if these companies are not participating? They must participate, because over time you start to see that it starts to create a network effect where more companies go into the market, the more people have confidence in the market, the more the market is attractive for small and medium-scale businesses to go into the market. Something must break. I have no policy view as to how this happens, but it's something that must happen. companies that represent the economy in a place like Nigeria, for example, be it in telecoms, be it in oil and gas, be it in manufacturing, must make its way to the market, because that creates a network effect that makes it easy for smaller companies to get involved. And so when we meet companies and we have conversations with them, one of the things we encourage them to do is, have you looked at the capital markets? Yes, NSIA may not invest in you directly. We're investing in funds that will invest in you. We've had one or two. One major one that we have invested directly in a company, but it's about how do you deepen that market. The third thing is, obviously, people will always point to the fact that legal and regulatory environments still remain challenging, and people, as a consequence, do not access these markets as effectively. I think that is an ongoing complaint, but it's also evolved, in my opinion. Today, the listing requirements in a place like Nigeria has improved substantially, and we continue to observe that across the board, this is what most African countries are doing. So what is our experience? It's very simple, and I'll leave it at 3 points. Number one, it's what I said earlier. Investing in and developing the local private equity company industry will, in my opinion, go a long way in giving them the right kind of capital they need, the right type of duration, and helping them in preparing their businesses for growth. We must try and encourage that the local capital market continues to deepen, and here is the role I believe all of us on this table and most sovereign wealth funds will play a role in helping that happen. Now, let me talk about the World Bank Group, which is the last part of your question, John Philippe. We have had an extensive experience with IFC. We have actually an MOU with IFC where we compare pipelines. The investment we made, obviously, in the gas processing company I'm talking about, IFC is also an investor. We've worked with them extensively in our infrastructure fund, in our motorways investments, and other areas of our infrastructure fund. All in all, I think it's been an excellent experience. The one thing that I observe, and this is where they have been of tremendous help, is when it comes to infrastructure investing, which is obviously the next key step in growing businesses across Africa, the biggest challenge I see is project preparation. There are 3 roles a company like the NSIA can play. We can invest, we can co-develop, we can sponsor deals. Frankly, I don't like the last 2. I don't like to sponsor, I don't like to co-develop, I like to just invest. But the reality is that most projects that come to us are not well prepared, and so we find ourselves backward integrating into trying to prepare them. Technical assistance in getting those projects to the point where we can invest in them simply is very essential. We've had this conversation last year at this table, and I kept saying this is where the problem is. Motorways are an excellent investment in a place like Nigeria. There is a road, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Terrible as it is, still carries 120,000 cars per day. Needs to be put on the market, needs to be one that is done as a PPP, but the preparatory work is extensive. And this is where I think across the board you see this. You see this in power, you see this in gas, you see this in healthcare. Project preparation makes a lot of difference. It takes time, it takes effort, but more importantly, it takes expertise. And this is where I think more can be done and more is expected from the World Bank Group in getting this to go. The second is obviously making sure it's easier for people to access the insurance programs. You have partial risk guarantees and all these things that MIGA does. Our experience, and Jean-Philippe, I'll give this to you as a feedback. Our experience has been that most people complain about how difficult and how long it takes to access this. My sense is that more can be done, but so far I think our experience with the IFC and the World Bank Group has been excellent. But again, we're never satisfied, we expect more. But thank you very much, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Uche.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.